The Branding Your Business podcast is for small business owners looking to build a customer favorite brand and a value-driven business. From solo shows covering marketing tactics to experts sharing their brand stories, each episode delivers actionable insights for entrepreneurs who want to impact the world. We're sharing how strategic moves and authentic connections can build a profitable business minus the burnout. Tune into the Branding Your Business podcast with me, Praise Santos McKenna of Come Plum, to design a brand your audience adores while building a life you love. Hey there, this is the Branding Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Praise Santos McKenna, the founder of the branding studio Come Plum in San Francisco, California. Many of you will have seen this on my Instagram, in our email newsletters, but I love going to Mexico. I'm a big fan of retreats. I'm a big fan of taking care of yourself. Sustainability in business is also making sure you're sustainable as an entrepreneur. And I've been to the Playa Viva resort 3 times, cannot recommend it enough. And David, the founder, is here with us today. Let me tell you a little bit about David. He is a regenerative, meaning social and environmental impact entrepreneur and investor. He is a biz dev guy at heart. He has some roots here in the Bay Area. His background is in sales and marketing in emerging media and technology. Over the last 20 years, his endeavors have focused on real estate and hospitality and follow his values for regenerative, environmental, and social impact. Through his teams at Playa Viva and Regenerative Travel, Inc., they have endeavored to leverage hospitality and real estate investments to bring capital meaning social, market, intellectual, natural, and financial, to work in improving the ecosystem, both people and planet, to create vibrant, resilient, healthy, and profitable systems for all participants. I was bugging David over email saying, you are one of the most value-driven entrepreneurs. We need to have you on the podcast. We need to share your story so people know what it's like in the flesh to live out both your personal values and to inject them into businesses and organizations and how that plays out. And so that's why we have David on the podcast today. For those of you who are watching the video version of this podcast, you can already see the Playa Viva vibes out there. This is one of my favorite rooms there at Playa Viva. You see the beautiful mosquito nets swaying in the wind. If you hear ocean sounds in the background, it is true. The ocean is there just giving its nice, gentle breezes. And so this is also a whole vibe. David, thank you so much for sharing space with us today. Can you give people what's the feel right now at Playa Viva? What's the vibe out there?
Gosh, I mean, I'm looking out over the ocean. It's a beach that, well, you've been there. I mean, you look left, you look right, and you see nothing and nobody as far as the eye can see. It's a private beach, except for the local fishermen coming down to fish. Right now, there's both a yoga group here and some individual guests who are traveling on their own. And we're also starting to gather a group of folks around the nonprofit work that we do. We're hosting some potential donors to see what we do here. So it's a usual mix of guests that are here. I'm looking at some folks boogie boarding right now. I'm sure there were whales reaching earlier in the morning, releasing baby turtles. Tonight, it's going to be a full moon ceremony down further on the beach. So it's just another day here at Playa Viva.
Just another day recording a podcast in paradise. This makes me so happy to hear. I was asking you earlier, how does one start something like Playa Viva and Regenerative Travel? And you have said, I just kind of fell into it and just kept going, learning along the way. I feel like this is a story for many entrepreneurs. They're kind of like, well, there was this thing presented and I started doing it and now we figured some things out. Can you tell us a little bit more how you fell into it and learned about it along the way? Because it seems like even the first thing you did was entrepreneurial. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing I did was start a video production company when I graduated from college. And that really came about because some friends of mine and I started student television at the University of North Carolina. And we started getting requests to do commercials and MTV videos for local bands and ads for local politicians because they liked the work that we were doing. But you couldn't do for pay work with university equipment. And a friend of mine had kind of invested in his own equipment. I was like, hey, I'm graduating. Some of these guys were a year behind me. So do you mind if I kind of take your equipment and start this business? And they were like, yeah, and invited a couple of friends. And we started that work of having a video production company and really being storytellers from the get-go. So I was working at a restaurant and as a waiter in Chapel Hill at the same time. And it was kind of like when the business got in the way of waiting tables, it was time to just do the business full time. And that was that evolution. Related to Playa Viva, yeah, we kind of fell into it as well. Sandra Khan, my ex-wife, and I had bought some property down in Trocones, set it up as kind of a home for rent because we wanted the folks who worked there to get a little extra money and pay for the operations of it, and ended up buying 200 acres, which is Playa Viva, a mile of private beach. And that was in 2006. And the original idea was to build homes, to build a community. And the first Playa Viva t-shirt, this is like season 14, it says like Playa Viva, a sustainable residence community and hotel, right? But when we opened with our model homes in 2008, folks listening remember that's during the economic collapse, global economic collapse. People were losing their primary homes, secondary homes. So buying a home in Mexico is just out of the question. So we pivoted our business. I think that's really a key to entrepreneurship is knowing how to pivot. And we pivoted to being a boutique hotel and expanded from those initial model homes, which was 5 rooms, to 8 rooms, to 12 rooms, a bigger yoga platform because we were getting more and more yoga retreats, and kept pivoting with our business until now we're building our 20th room.
I did that so much. I feel like there's a lot of folks kind of in that in between phase right now of like, oh, there's an opportunity presented to me. I'm going to start doing it. Wait, can I make it my full time thing? And I like how you're like, well, I was waiting tables, but the business was getting in the way of waiting tables. It was time to transition. Or you bought some property in Mexico and you had this vision, you had this idea, and you started going forward until like, okay, you hit a wall totally outside of your control and you figured out how to turn along the way. Like these detours are actually really cool opportunities, even though I think a resident community would still be amazing there. I feel like you're able to open up to different sorts of retreats, different sorts of guests coming in than you would have otherwise too. And so we love to feel a pivot. We love to see how it works out. How did regenerative travel play along with that? Was it also something that was presented to you? Was it a conversation that happened? How did that come about?
Yeah, I think it comes from listening deeply. We have a lot of regular guests, as like you, come back. Uh, and there's a family on Paige, and she lives in Palo Alto in the Bay Area, and she's got 2 daughters, and they have kids. And so it's a multi-generational family that comes to Playa Viva every other year. What Pam asked me one time is like, David, we love Playa Viva. Who else is doing what you're doing? Where are the Playa Vivas of the world? You must know. You're tracking them, right? And that's when it occurred to me, wait a minute, if they're looking for this, other people are looking for this as well. And so looking at, models like Small Leading Hotels of the World and those kinds of hotel collections, it was, okay, there's an opportunity here. Started talking to different folks who had done it before, and what they said, yeah, we just kind of called in 20 hotels, 10 showed up. And from there, that's how we started this collection. And so I was like, okay, let's do that, right? Take the model from other people. And we called in, I think, a dozen hotels, 6 showed up. So, the 50% number worked. But what surprised me from the conversations of those 6 hotels was I thought everybody would be interested in this co-marketing. Like if Pam Page is interested in us, they're going to be interested in you and everybody else. And that economies of scale and sales and marketing. But the conversations that were really lively were about sharing best practices. How do you manage your gray water? How do you onboard people? Those conversations were really, really lively. And so I saw the value of this wasn't just for the guests, but it was for the hotel community around the sharing of best practices. And so sometimes when you start one idea with one value set, you realize there's a whole other set of value sets that go along with that as well. Now, Regenerative Travel is being run by a partner who came into the business in 2019, Amanda Ho, and Amanda kind of took it to the next level. One of the things that a saying that I like to use is to hammer everything as a nail. And as a hotelier, I saw Regenerative Travel just for hotels. But Amanda not coming in as a hotelier really opened it up. And from a regenerative standpoint, you want to be whole systems thinking and approach, and really made regenerative travel much broader, bringing in agents of change, travel agents, bringing in, um, a market, other affiliate folks into customers, really rounding it out. So it's been a really beautiful experience. So part of that, I think, is letting go of your original vision and letting other folks kind of run with it and make it bigger than your original vision.
This is so good because, again, something was presented to you. And I like the term that you use. There's deep listening. It's like this awareness, whether it's from people that you trust, people who know you well, they start planting little seeds and you're like, wait, there might be something here. And oftentimes I see with entrepreneurs, we have this hypothesis, oh, it's going to be this, right? It's going to be just for hotels and we're going to do cross marketing. And then you have your first meeting and you're seeing, well, actually, all these folks in hotel management, they need community. They actually want to share in this. They want to do this. And then Amanda comes in and keeps on up leveling it. And that is what I hear. That's deep listening and also an open handedness of what could this thing be? We often tell the entrepreneurs that we coach that your business oftentimes has its own personality. You're almost raising a child. You're there just as a guardian and steward to let it be what it's going to be. You could try being a helicopter business owner and parent, but I don't think the business really flourishes like that, where oftentimes it has its own path and it has its own destiny. And I've seen that in the stories of Regenerative Travel and Playa Viva. A big thing that I was so impressed by with Playa Viva the first time I came there was that we had maybe like day 2 or 3 on the first retreat I was there on, we had a like sit down moment where we could learn about Playa Viva and really understand that it's not just an eco-friendly resort. It was actually regenerative. And regenerative was this phrase I had heard but didn't really understand. Could you share a little bit about what it is to be regenerative and how honestly, like the for-profit arms of some of your businesses really help to do the deeper work of the work you do in the community?
Sure. And I'll try to be brief with it because it is a big concept, but I think once you understand it, you kind of grok it. I mean, if I would have said to you, what is sustainable 30 years ago, you'd have been, what? But now sustainable just has an immediate understanding to that word. And so, regenerative to me at its core is kind of once we understand and are conscious of the negative impacts that we do have on the earth and ecosystems, society, etc., we can either be on a path of degenerating and extractive, or we can move up a path of being generative and making things better. And, a lot of people get caught up on terms, but for me, it's about that path. You can be green and really moving towards your generation. You could be sustainable and moving to regeneration. You could be regenerative, and there's probably going to be something after that. But the most important thing is to be on that path. And it is a paradigm shift in changing how you think. And to me, the core of that kind of paradigm shift is moving from what's called scarcity mindset to abundance mindset. Scarcity being kind of what I think a lot of capitalism is being driven by right now and some of the problems with it, which is I need to have more. I win, you lose, I take, I gather. I have to have more, 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 more because there's not enough. There's not enough. Scarcity. Abundance is there's enough for all of us. And if we work within the natural systems, those systems have a balance and we can all have enough. And that's where you move into the abundance mindset. There are many different things about regeneration. Regeneration is a process from a development standpoint about how you go about understanding the history of place. How did this piece of land, this place that I'm working on, how was it degenerated? And by understanding how it got to be the way it is, it was a coastal forest, slash and burn agriculture took it down. We had an archaeological site here, so a community lived here. How was this place worked, managed, lived on, degraded? And what is our role in bringing back the abundance that was once here? And that is part of the regenerative development. So the other part is this whole systems thinking approach, where you're not just taking one stovepipe approach and we're going to solve all the world's problems just by looking at this or just dealing with this. But it's really looking at a whole systems approach. And the way I describe it in the work that we're doing here at Playa Viva in what's called Resimar, which is our watershed regeneration project. Resimar stands for regenerating from Sierra to Mar, from the Sierra, which is the mountains, all the way down to the ocean. And we have various nodes that are working in that area. We have a water node, we have a permaculture node, we have a marine life node, etc. And the way I describe it is the watershed is a whole system, just like my body is a whole system. I have a digestive system, I have a circulatory system, I have a respiratory system. They're separate systems, like nodes, but they all work together as a whole system. And that's how to really take a whole systems approach in regeneration. So as you can see, I can kind of go on and on about this. I'll stop there, but hopefully that helps put it all in context.
100%. I like the way that you described it of research, almost understanding the history of what you're coming into. I feel like oftentimes as entrepreneurs, again, we kind of fall into this thing and we're just trying to float and trying to survive. But this is a little bit of a step back of, okay, what is this community now that we're a part of? What is this system we're a part of? What is the state it's into? Who are the benefactors? Who are the people who are affected by us being here? We just talked about a lot of intuitive listening, but this is now listening to the environment around us as well. And this is so important because you have a physical space, right? Like you actually bought a piece of land. And this is how I often describe Playa Viva. I'm like, y'all, they are cleaning up the water for the whole community, from the people up into the mountains. It's like 5 villages or 5 communities above them. It not only benefits Playa Viva, this resort, but it benefits the whole community. This community is better because Playa Viva moved in. And I'm going to throw a little surprise question at you, because when I think about our friends who listen to this podcast, some of them might relate to you of like, David, I also just graduated from college and I kind of fell into this video production thing. Could I start thinking how my business could be regenerative? I feel like you, as a brick and mortar of sorts, like you have a physical community, but what about those who are just in different industries that are not as tangible? Is there a way to integrate a research approach into David many years ago when he was starting his video production company? What would you say to him now with the mindset you have?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. My mind initially went to a statement that I heard recently, which is this next generation isn't looking as much to work for a company as to work for a cause. And they want to make a positive impact. And if the company can make a positive impact at the same time, then all the much better. So given a choice between working for a clothing company or creating a clothing company that is going to extract and leave trash and chemicals and destroy and leave plastic all over. If I can work for a company like a Patagonia that's going to have a positive impact on the earth, then I'd rather do that. And so I think given climate change, LA and the fires, just to set, context to when we're talking about this now, and so many other things that are happening, I think that imperative gets more real every time. And so if you are starting a business, I'm assuming either you're starting with those values, and it's knowing that to run that business with those values is important, and it will be important to you, and it will be important to your customer. And that's where the market's going. Capitalism wants to become a more conscious capitalism. And so, in our process of being regenerative with Playa Viva, one of the first steps we did was create a set of core values. And those core values then lead a lot of our decisions. Those core values are around water, energy, and waste streams being more transparent, cleaner, more renewable. It's about promoting biodiversity. It's about creating a living legacy and thinking about our decisions and the impact they have generations down. And then 2 core differentiators are creating meaningful community and promoting transformational experiences. And by knowing those, every time decisions come our way, we have to decide between A or B or C or whatever. By saying, how does this fit into our core values? It allows us to make better decisions in the long run. And so, and people say, well, what's the difference between that and a mission statement? And I think a mission statement often is something that gets created, put on the shelf, and you forget about it. But these are your values. This is how I decide how I'm going to live my life or how I'm going to run my business. And I think that helps out. So that's kind of what initially came to mind with your question. So hopefully that helped answer.
David, I'm so tempted to just end the recording right now because this is my soapbox. This is my favorite thing of, okay, these are why values are actually really practical. We're not just saying, oh, sustainable. We're not just saying community. We're really saying because these values exist, this helps us decide, do we take on this new client? Because this business exists, this helps us decide whether to say yes to this thing or no to this thing. And I love the idea of this next generation of entrepreneur having that from the beginning, because I do feel like we talk about it a lot. There's greenwashing that happens a lot in different industries. They're like, oh, well, the market now, capitalists now, like they want to make sure we're eco-friendly or doing something good. And they like put something together to appeal to the market. And we can kind of sense it. Like our BS meters, they were like, oh, you just kind of did that to market to us. Whereas this new generation, if you all are listening, now is the time to be quiet, go on a retreat, to be honest, spend some time alone, listening, taking it in, reflecting on what people have told you. Playa Viva, again, great plug, great place to hone in on your values of what's important to you. We'll have some links in our show notes because we have worksheets for you to tap into your personal values and to your business values so that you can figure out, okay, here's how I'm going to lead this business moving forward. Here is how I'm going to say yes to the right things and no to the wrong things.
Do you ever feel like you wear so many hats as a small business owner? I totally get that. Here at Come Plum, we want to keep you in your zone of genius, how you serve and show up for people. So leave the branding to us. In a collaborative way through brand coaching, we help you define your brand foundations, your brand strategy, and your brand expression, all that fun stuff like logo, websites, videos, photos, and more. If you go to comeplum.com and mention in the contact form that you heard about us through our Branding Your Business podcast, you get cool perks like an extra hour of coaching or maybe even 10% off your coaching package. We can't wait to collaborate with you to build a brand that you and your clients love.
You reminded me of another thing, which is this kind of idiom of the customer is always right. And it takes a lot of guts to say, actually, no. Sometimes the customer is asking for the easy way out because they're used to it. But you as a business person or you as a person have been doing this longer and might know kind of what's right for the customer. You know, it's like we do 40 retreats a year. You did one. Let us help you be good at what you do. But what it gets to also is this issue of, hey, if the customer wants a to-go cup, I've got to give them a to-go cup. If the customer wants a plastic straw, I got to give them a plastic straw. And the answer is no, you don't. You need to educate the customer that there is another way of doing this and a better way of doing it. And they will be surprised to say, wow, you know, this whole place runs off solar power and energy, and my water is like going out to the garden to feed the garden, and, you know, my food is being compost and going to pigs. This is all about that creating transformation experiences. But it's having the courage to be able to kind of give the customer not necessarily what they want, but what they need.
This is so good because these are these business idioms, right? That we need to rethink and remix and step in as strong brands so that people can view you as visionaries and leaders and thought leaders in this field, that they can trust you. Again, it's like that right tone of education of like, they're not wrong. I am presenting a better way. I am presenting a way maybe they haven't thought of before. And I think that is huge and will be such a good encouragement for people who are a little bit scared, like, is the market ready for me? I do have this vision, mission, and values that I really want to put into my business, but it's never been done before, but I think it could work. I don't know if the world's ready. Like, this is the encouragement, the permission slip. Take baby steps toward it. Be the educator in that field because the world really needs more voices like yours, which another really practical thing I'm curious about too, because right, there's so many systems now that you're managing. There's being a hoteler, like you have hospitality that you have to manage. And now you also have things like Resimar, you have the Women's Co-op, and those are like separate initiatives and systems that have to run in and of itself. How do you allocate different resources of your leadership, of finances, of your team to make sure those things are running well? Because I have had moments where I like had this great idea, run with this thing, and it's actually not the for-profit part of my business. And I I've kind of burnt out, and that is another story for another time. But I look to entrepreneurs like you of like, okay, they've like been able to steer the ship and keep these initiatives alive. Are you also figuring out along the way? Do you have a system of how to allocate resources for these different initiatives of yours?
Yeah, if I told you I had a system, that would, I would say the closest thing is a process. So there are a couple of things there. I would say one thing is, build fertile soil, invest in fertile soil. And then what you plant in that fertile soil will have the nutrients to grow on its own, to really nurture good people. People are, the seeds that will allow whatever idea is. And, it's like with a women's co-op. Osmida came in as a volunteer in the turtle camp and she liked working on the farm. So she spent her extra time working on the farm. And Amanda, who's the head of permaculture, kind of identified her as a very skilled person and developed her and invested in her. And eventually, this whole concept of a women's co op evolved from the farm. It was a need from the community. And, I thought as a business person, the women's co op is all about adding value and making marmalades from, raw products. You can, sell it at X times more in the marketplace than the raw product. And then after sitting in enough women's co op sessions with folks that we're bringing in to see it, and you see it grow from Gabby, the first woman in the co-op, to 2 to 4 and to 8 people. And what you hear them talk about is that the women's co-op is about creating safe space for women in the community. Because, we did a farm and then that spun off Osmida and that spun off a women's co-op. And now there's safe space for women in the community. So the process there was, we invested in a farm, invest in a nonprofit, but we invest in good leaders and listening to the community and allow it to create the entities that it needs to become in the process. And sometimes I think what can burn us out is we're trying to push the rock up the hill rather than like guiding it down the hill as it's moving down the hill. Right. And so, my time now really is more in mentoring, which is starting out all of our conversations with 3 questions. And these I learned from a group called Legacy Works Group, which is kind of our partner in Vincent and I'm on the board of for full disclosure. And James with Legacy Works really taught me about holding circle and in circle really asking 3 questions. One of those questions is, how do you feel? Start with how do you feel? And the reason is you're dealing with everybody as real people and you're recognizing everybody as real people. And it's how you feel. The joke answer here is you can't say bien. You can't say fine. Like, no, you really have to talk about what's going on in your life. And so much comes from just that. So my business meetings start with how do you feel and dealing with a whole person. Then usually it's tell me, what's going on? What are the success stories? What's working? And then the other one is, what do you need help? And I think it's important as managers to always lead with, how can I help? I talk about the difference between the manager that walks in the meeting and says, what's wrong? And everybody in the meeting either clams up or points fingers, and you've got an atmosphere of distrust. People don't talk and problems aren't going to get solved. But that same manager walks in the meeting, rolls up his or her sleeves and says, how can I help? People are there and realize you're there to help them out. And so much more comes out as a result of that. So that's kind of the process that I follow in trying to meet with people on a regular basis and support them in what they're doing and how they.
That is so good. Yeah, the 3 questions are, how are you feeling? Really acknowledging them as a whole person, right? This is not some AI robot you put in charge of a women's co-op. These are people with real lives, things going on. And then I love the idea of starting with success versus starting with what fires do we need to put out? Because it also sounds like you're getting your folks in the right mindset and almost a reminder to yourself and to your team, like, this is working. This is something worth investing our resources in. And then lastly, the idea of being a helper and coming alongside them and still empowering them as a leader to solve the problem, but using you as a resource. I think that is huge because I think that in management, oftentimes we feel like our managers don't see us, or we feel like our managers are only acknowledging what's wrong, which doesn't build trust with your manager, which also, too, for your values, this is another very practical way, a kind of a holistic approach. You're not doing it just for the environment. You're doing it socially as well, for your team as well, and seeing all the systems as whole people too. And so I love this principle, and I feel like entrepreneurs can integrate this at the beginning. Even if you're a solopreneur, I want you to hear this and do this for yourself. Take off your worker hat and put on your manager hat and ask yourself, how am I showing up today? What can I celebrate? And how can I help myself? Or what are the resources I need to help myself? I feel like this is so good, so important. If I think of burnt out me trying all these initiatives, if I had put on that hat earlier, that would have helped me a lot. I always brag that like going to Mexico is so easy because we live in California. So that's really easy for us. But this is still an international environment that you're working with. And I know that there are entrepreneurs on their vision board who are like, I actually want to work more internationally. I either want to work nomadically or I want to open a satellite campus of what we're doing in another country. What does that actually look like? What are the wins? What are the pros about having another country as a home base? What are the challenges? What are things you wish you knew? I know a little bit of your story that you grew up a little more internationally and spent some time in Mexico City, but yeah, what does it look like? Give us the behind the scenes of running a international business.
Yeah, every country has its challenges. And when I've spoken at events like glamping events, the first question that everybody asks is, how did you get your entitlements? How long did it take you to get your entitlements? And entitlements, building someplace is so difficult. In Mexico, we went through an entitlement process, getting all of our building permits. But once we did that, we didn't have to like go through all the detail now, years later when we expand than we would if we were in the US or in other countries. So there are advantages to being in Mexico in that way. There are some problems. In the US, I get an invoice and say, the invoice was for this and move on. In Mexico, they have a VAT system, a value added tax system, and I have to get a government kind of a stamped invoice for everything. And so as a company that's trying to work with building a supply chain of local people, many of those haven't set themselves up as official entities with the government. And so as a hotel, or just any business, we can't write off any expense that we don't have what's called a factura, a government issued invoice. So over the last couple of years, we've really been working with these smaller providers and helping them get set up. But until then, we're kind of taking that hit because it's part of our core values to work and source locally. So, in every country has its positives and negatives that way. Today, our challenge in Mexico is we're importing a air conditioning unit called Evening Breeze, which is a highly efficient system. It's not your mini split type system. And we're building a new building, a new room that's air conditioned as a model home for going back into doing residences, and getting that through the customs is just like such a pain for just like this air conditioned unit. So yes, there are challenges wherever you go.
Pros and cons. But again, what I hear too, you are recognizing the systems that are around you, but also it sounds like you're creating systems, and also how regenerative is that, in that these suppliers that you're using locally within the community, now that they have these systems set up for VAT, for telling the government how much they're selling, now they can have other clients besides you too. And again, this is the regenerative, hey, we're helping build economic stability within this community by building, in a way, like mentoring these other businesses, which is incredible. But I like the very practical insight of like, okay, y'all, if you are also trying to start a business somewhere else, everyone is going to have their headache, whether it's importing air conditioning or whether it's learning a new language, learning a new culture. And so I love that our world is becoming more of a global economy, and we have to take the good with the challenges as well, which a fun way for folks to start, dipping their toe into more international waters is actually hosting a retreat. I hosted my first retreat this past year in Mexico City, which is a little different just because it was like more of a city. So I had a few more resources, but it was really wonderful to have been on so many retreats and then lead my own, create the culture, set the tone. But as you mentioned earlier, you all are the voices to be trusted because you host 40 plus retreats a year. If you're thinking about an entrepreneur who's deciding, like, oh, I want to experiment, I want to try to host a retreat, or I want to add this as a service for my community, what are some best practices? What are things that you've seen work well for the retreat host, for them finding you? What advice would you give to these people?
Yeah, I think the two initial things that come to mind is container and art. So where you choose to do it can have an impact on how you contain that group. So if you're in the city or you're in San Miguel de Allende or someplace, you may say, you know what, I want my people for 3 hours in the morning, but then they're going to want to go explore and go and do, and I want that to be part of the experience. If you come to a place like Playa Viva where we're more remote, it's going to be like, no, I want to keep people together and I want them, I want to control what I call that arc. And the arc is, you're moving people through that transformational experience that's part of the work that you do. They come in kind of with one set and then they come out with another set of experiences, tools, knowledge, relationships that come from that. So, a lot of it is how you organize that arc and storytelling. And, it may be we're going to move people through the core elements, fire, water, air, etc. Or we're going to move them through, body, mind, soul, think about the arc of what your work is and how to move people through that. And then how that container can amplify the work that you're trying to do. Playa Viva as a container kind of has its own magic. I've learned over the time that it's very simple. Playa Viva gives you not what you want, but what you need. And you may come in expecting one thing and something else is going to happen because that's actually what you need.
Again, it's this open-handedness of like, okay, the location that you choose, honestly, like how much magic is there to it where it could also be part of the leadership of the retreat too. And I can attest that Playa Viva, it reminded me that you can actually come back from a retreat rested. I had gone to other retreats that were so conferencey and so cerebral of sorts that I came back more tired and needed another vacation after some going to this thing called a retreat. Whereas it's so true, Playa Viva does have a magic. It does have a nourishment to it, unlike any other place. So for those listening who are wanting to have a more contained environment, if your community needs that reprieve, they need to get away, Playa Viva is an incredible, incredible place for that. I almost want to like post pictures of some of the food that I've eaten at Playa Viva too, of just how eating from the land, being part of the local cuisine really kind of changes you from the inside out in the best way. So I feel like this is such a good way for people to think about retreats, really think about the story, the vibe, the container, the arc that you want to create, and then choose your location from there. Speaking of foresight, one of our last questions I want to ping on you is that as part of the podcast, I've been on another soapbox of talking about we're oftentimes building a business and building a brand. And a lot of people are listening to this podcast because they want really practical tips. We have very practical tips on the show of branding, business decisions, etc. And here's the thing is that a lot of our entrepreneurs will probably like go through these worksheets, use some of our formulas, and actually get to where they want to be in the business. And they also might not be mindful of the person they're becoming along the way. So we called it building and becoming. And this is one of the things I love to talk about too, again, of being a sustainable leader and to being a sustainable part of a community is who is this person you're becoming as you are leading this business? And as you've been leading Playa Viva, I can't believe it'll be 20 years next year. You said you got the land in 2006. So, I mean, almost 2 decades of leading, his jaw drops. Who is the person David has become along the way? How has that surprised you? How has that challenged you? Yeah, tell us a little bit of the David story, of the becoming David who he is today story.
Oh, God. Yeah, when I had my 60th birthday party here, I invited a bunch of my friends who knew me back in college, and they just couldn't believe that this is what I was doing. So, um, I definitely evolved as a person in that way. But, as you were talking about branding and who I've become. What came to mind too that I'd like to share are one, we did some work early on brand architecture. And I really believe that helps you get to the core of who you are as a business. And our brand archetype came out as kind of Eden, Return to Innocence. Believe it or not, it's the same brand archetype as Coca-Cola and Disney. As far as I see it, Coke, I'd like to give the world a Coke and we all live in harmony. And Disney, you can wear ears and be a child again. So Playa Viva is about that return to innocence. And so it's part of the transformation that happens here is that immersion in the luxury of nature and making you feel at home. And so much of what we do is about that. So much of it is also about storytelling. And so much of it is about deep listening. Things like Where Your Vacation Meets Your Values, which we've trademarked, and the immersion in the luxury of nature. These are things that we just kept hearing. And people saying, wow, I feel like I'm at home at Playa Viva. And, when you hear that, and that's the brand messaging you're trying to put out, that I feel safe, then, you're doing the right thing. And so, just as Playa Viva has its brand archetype, Regenerative Travel has its own brand archetype. It's kind of in the leader, but more in the Camelot, in the Knights of the Round Table, that the leadership comes from all the different hotels and stakeholders that are around that. I haven't done any personal brand archetyping. Am I a reflection of these brands? Sure. Maybe you're reminding me praise of something I need to do. I need to go on a personal branding archetype retreat with you, and you need to do it here. So, how does that sound?
I love an invitation, of course. Yeah, it is interesting because I like the idea of these friends of yours in college coming to Playa Viva for your 60th birthday, and they're like, David, what? How did this happen? And because you've been there along the way, you've seen the increments coming along, but someone who has fast forwarded through your life, it's just surprising, which is also this kind of call to us of whether we put intention around it or not, again, or whether you go on a retreat or not, to kind of think about it too, is just think about who the person you want to become. Who do you want to invite to your 60th birthday, and what do you want them to say about you and the work that you've done? It's also this reminder of legacy building. This is also a reminder of, you mentioned earlier within the brand of Playa Viva, to affect 7 generations. Like, what the energy, the gifts, the resources we've been given. Let's just think ahead. Let's have a vision for us personally, for our business, to think about this legacy that we want to leave. And then you're going to come to the retreat, the personal branding retreat I'm hosting at Playa Viva, date TBD. David's going to be there and a few of our other friends. This is me listening right now. This is me listening to my community.
Well, listening to you also reminds me that the core values that we developed for Playa Viva, those were our values as kind of the founders of it. So I think that those things are core to who I'm becoming. I think the other one is, at its core, why am I on this regenerative path? And I think it's because I see our role as humans. And, going back to the Bible and the Genesis story, there's the sense that, God created man, and the term that's used is dominion over what God had created. And as I understand it, the word dominion was the best that the King George Bible could come up with, because the translation is a word that's more like stewardship and taking responsibility for and looking after, not to dominate dominion, but to take care of. And so I really see our role as humans as we evolve is to learn how to take care of and leave this place better for the next generation, which right now is very personal to you, but it's personal to all of us. And so I think that is part of my evolution, is really understanding that is a core value of mine, and that I also believe that change happens little by little until it happens all at once. And all the little decisions and activities that we take here, just like I talk about investing in soil, eventually flower and that big change happens. And so I see this as just the small little piece that I can do and be a part of and bring marshal resources to make the place a better place.
That is so good. Yeah, we're stewards, we're caretakers of the resources we've been given, which people will want to experience that for themselves. How can folks find you? How can folks find Playa Viva? How can they connect with you further?
Yeah, playaviva.com, PLAYAVIVA.com, and regenerativetravel.com would be the other one for that group. Legacy Works Group. That's all found on my LinkedIn. And I listened to your podcast about LinkedIn, which I loved. And yeah, if you want to connect, the one thing I ask is you put a personal note. You don't just reach out, but you say, hey, David, I heard your podcast with praise and would love to connect about blah, blah, blah. That's it.
We love that. We don't need LinkedIn spammers. We need real humans wanting to connect with other real humans. So we'll put all those links in the show notes. Thank you so much, David, for spending time with us today. Please say hi to the whales. Please say hi to the team. Please say hi to the baby turtles. I'll be back soon, and hopefully we'll bring a lot of friends and listeners from the podcast too.
That's great. Thank you very much.